Hello everyone. Long time no see. How are you? It's been a hot second. I had a little bit of a health scare last year, but hey, I'm doing better. I'm back. Trying to find something to fill my days as I've kind of been a lull in my life, and I am excited to get back into YouTube as well. I think it'll do me some good to have something for me to do that's accountable. And I also want to edit my own videos again because it's good for me to do something. We are going to talk about all the books I read this year, and you're like, it's August. What are you gonna do? Review like 40 books? No, I'm gonna review about, 6 books? I have not been reading that much this year, and that is, again, as aforementioned, the health scare part that has taken a lot of my time. But I just have not been reading a lot, and I would like to fix that. So I have been in a pretty horrific reading slump throughout, pretty much since March, or even February. I've just been in a horrific reading slump for the aforementioned reasons they're heretofore. However, I think that it's time to change. I think that it is time to breathe life anew into my reading journey and to consume more books as a way for me to consume more media and consume more stories and consume more art, as anyone else would want to do or any other reader would want to do. And plus, I think that it's kind of horrific as someone who once been writing content on this channel and still does booktube content occasionally on this channel, for me to have read so little. However, it does work out quite nicely when I am able to say, these are all the books I read in the first half of this year, and it's only like 6. So, hey, let's do it. Let's talk about all the books I read this year. So I'm gonna scoot over. Don't mind this. This is a pile of books we will get to. But I'm going to put the cover of it right here because I have so few physical copies of the books that I read. So I'm just going to put the cover right here, I think. Editing Danny will do the trick. Ta-da! Oh, I should also say, no spoilers. No spoilers in what I consider to be a spoiler. The first book I read this year was You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. It is a story about this trans man who gets pregnant against his will and has to give birth to this baby, all against his will. And it follows the story of him kind of trapped in this worm cult, a cult that worships worms, and the cult is forcing him to give birth to this child, pretty much. And I rated this 5 stars because it was a fantastic book. And in addition to, the atmosphere was just so thick with dread that it really contributed to what was the overall theme of this book, which is like bodily autonomy and all that stuff, which I don't think is a spoiler because it's to be expected in a book about a trans man getting pregnant and being forced to give birth to the child. I definitely would recommend this book. Check out the trigger warnings though. For sure. I did have the physical version of this book, but I am lending it to a friend who is taking his sweet time getting through it because it's just too dark that he can't stomach it more than half the time. Maybe don't read it while you're eating. Like I said, I would definitely recommend this book, but definitely look at the trigger warnings though, because there's some gnarly stuff in there. And I don't say that lightly as someone who likes to raw dog a book, go into it blind, which is what I pretty much did with this book. I heard nothing about the author. I did hear that the author has some YA books out. I might read those, although YA isn't really my thing anymore. But I am interested to see what he's written in the past. It's just a point of I'm not a big fan of YA for a multitude of reasons. But it's just not for me. I would be interested in reading more of his work if he ever did come out with an adult novel again. I definitely will pick it up. Maybe I'll read a YA book from him. Is it likely? No, but maybe. I read Astrid Parker Does Not Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. I'll put the book here. I did have the book, but I left it in LA. Oh, fun fact, I'm in NorCal again. But anyway, Astrid Parker Does Not Fail. It's a story about an uptight interior designer has an HGTV show with this kind of perky, sunshiny carpenter character, and they don't like each other, but they have to get along. And then it's a rom-com, enemies to lovers, such and such. I really enjoyed it. I always like Ashley Herring Blake. I've read 2 books from her so far. Maybe 3? No, 2. 2 books so far. I read Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and I really enjoyed that book. But this is the second book in the Bright Fall series. It all takes place in this, like, Oregon, Washington-esque small town. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Did it blow my mind? No. Looking back on it now, I tend to be getting on a high after I finish reading a book. I'm more likely to rate it higher than what I actually think it is, because I'm such on a high of like, oh, I finished a book, yay me. So I think more accurately I would have rated it like 3.5 stars rather than 4. But small differences, c'est la vie. I think I just need to come to terms with the fact that rom-coms are not my favorite thing in the world. Which sucks because, like, I like the idea of rom-coms. I really do, especially queer ones. I like the idea of a rom-com where you just, like, turn your brain off and just read for entertainment, enjoy the fun. Not to say that rom-coms don't have any political themes or things like that, which oftentimes they do. The existence of monster romance being a thing is quite political in and of itself. But that's not the point of the book. The point of the book, for the most part, is for empty entertainment. And I wish I could do that. Unfortunately, I am cursed with thought. I think too much about things. And when a book is meant for that purpose, I find it quite difficult to walk away from it with any lasting thoughts besides, that was fun. Which isn't a bad thing. However, when I read books, I want the book to call into question things that I previously thought and kind of change my mind about things and for me to learn something. But when I read a rom-com book, I oftentimes walk away with, that was fun. Which, again, isn't a bad thing. It's just me. So, yeah, will I read another rom-com? Definitely. Will I enjoy the rom-com book? I think I will. I think I enjoy it for what it is, which is a good time. However, I don't walk away with it necessarily with my socks blown off. I don't think I've ever rated a rom-com book like 5 stars, which I guess speaks to the fact that I should stop reading rom-coms. However, I still do enjoy them. I just don't think that they're anything to write home about, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different experience, which then calls the question of, should I be rating these books on a different scale? I don't think so, because I still do think that a rom-com, a well-written rom-com, should teach me something. And it has not as of late. Yeah, I don't think it ever has. Maybe that's not the point. Maybe I'm overthinking things. But, c'est la vie. It is what it is. Next book I read was The Troop by Nick Cutter. I have read 2 other Nick Cutter books before, Little Heaven and The Deep by Nick Cutter. I tried reading that religious Catholic-esque book, but I only got a few pages in, and then I had to return the library book. I don't know why. It felt very dense, which usually I like dense, but I just don't think I was in the mood for it. Nonetheless, The Troop is a story about these Boy Scouts that go into the Canadian wilderness, and then they find something that lurks in the darkness in these woods, and it's a story about them trying to survive the few nights that they have together. I think I described that very poorly. It was better than how I described it. I will say that. 4 out of 5 stars. Again, I think that was a case of me getting off of a high of finishing a book and going, yay, I finished a book. So I think I should change the review to 3 stars. However, it wasn't to say that it's a bad thing. I will say that, like, a 3-star read for me is a good read. It was a good read, an entertaining read, but not much more than that. So I don't think that an entertaining read is necessarily a bad thing. I just think that it could have said more if it was written in a different way. Yeah, 3-star read. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was scary. It was spooky. I enjoyed it. I was very much surprised at the end of this book. I mean, I should have seen it coming. Nonetheless, Nick Cutter always surprises me with his endings. It came out before his other books that I read, I'm pretty sure. This was like the classic Nick Cutter book that was being advertised about on Book Talk. It even says, horror book talk sensation on the back. I think this is his most popular book, to say, which I was initially kind of hesitant on. I do love horror, but that's not necessarily my type of horror. But nonetheless, Nick Cutter does it again. I really enjoyed this book. I really love all of the characters and the way that they are written. It was quite sad at the end. It was very sad in the end. And I do think that this book definitely is a lot more political than, let's say, a rom-com, which is something that I do appreciate personally. I think that horror is definitely a way to explore political themes in a way that is not necessarily completely subtle, or not subtle, the complete opposite. That is not necessarily overt in ways, but it's still nonetheless terrifying because you're exploring people's fears and what their thoughts are in the world currently. And a lot of those things speak truth to what scares us, things that we cannot control. Oftentimes that comes in the sense of politicalness, which is all up in the air and is a lot bigger than we can control as an individual. Yes, there are things that we can do to be better, vote in your local elections and recycle and all that. But in the bigger themes of like things, it's quite difficult to imagine yourself doing any good difference. And I think that in of itself can be very good in horror, not necessarily in this horror book, but just horror in general. This is just me simping for horror genre in general. I do love the horror genre for that reason, and also I like the tropes of it, of like the spookiness of it all. It all tends to meld quite nicely with my interests. But yeah, I definitely would recommend this book for people that are interested in horror, especially Nick Cutter. He's a classic for a reason. Not a classic, I think Stephen King is more of a classic horror novel. He's popular for a reason. How about that? He's popular for a reason, and that he knows how to write horror, and he does it really well. I tend not to annotate my books anymore. I just can't be bothered. Next book I read is a bit of a spicy one, which should be a bit of a surprise considering I don't really read erotica that often. Nonetheless, it is Love Me Not by Eden Emory. I'm reading the book title off of my laptop. Love Me Not, a sapphic CEO ex-nanny billionaire auction romance. This was just a fun read to turn my brain off. And like I said, not to say that, I was talking about in the context of rom-coms, erotica is a little bit different. But not to say that erotica doesn't have political themes, I believe that it does. But that's not the point of the book. The point is to get off and have fun. I enjoyed the book, frankly. Would I say that it was well written? No, but I don't think that's why you go into an erotica for. However, I will say that just because I expect more from erotica books, does it mean that, like, I'm invalid for criticizing them? Erotica books should be, or not should be, but like are written for the explicit purpose to have fun, and if they do that, they fulfilled their purpose, and they're good in and of itself. Valid critique on that there. I think personally that like you can criticize a book's writing, and especially an erotica book's writing, and the criteria doesn't have to be at least it's not bad. If you have to say at least it's not horrible on a book that's erotica, it's okay to say it wasn't good either, and that's a valid critique of that book. Which is, suffice to say, long story short, the sex scenes were great. It's just, the characters felt a little flat, in my opinion. Which, I know that's not why you read an erotica book for. You don't read it for, like, fully rounded characters and for the plot more often than not. You're reading it for the sex scenes. That's why people pick it up. Which I think is a valid reason to pick up a book. I mean, go off, have fun on your own. I just don't think that it's necessarily a productive way to be looking at a book in the sense of, at least it wasn't horrible to critique a book, or any book, never mind the fact that it's erotica. So I think it just depends on how you classify reviewing a book in the first place. Did it fulfill its primary purpose, or did it fulfill the purpose in which you wanted it to? Which, I don't think either situation is wrong or right. I think that it's just, I'm a bit of a book snob. Which I'm coming to terms with slowly but surely. I will accept it at some point. However, not now. But yeah, will I read the continuation of this book? I don't know. I have my eye on them. I'm kind of interested in it, but I don't want to buy the book. I don't want to buy the book physically because I don't want that on my bookshelf, because the idea of someone perusing my bookshelf to borrow a book and they find an erotica book seems a little bit mortifying to me. Additionally, the covers are not subtle. I don't want erotica to take my collection. Not like that. I just don't. I feel embarrassed the idea of someone perusing my physical book collection and coming across an erotica book. I just don't want them to know what I'm into. And I think that's okay to admit. So I have these books on ebook, but I can't borrow the books through the library just because I think they're independently published, which independently published books have a bit of a harder time being bought through the library. So I was like, okay, I'll just buy it on Kindle. So I bought the first book on Kindle for like $1. And I could buy the second Kindle book for like $3, but I don't wanna. I don't wanna buy an ebook. I don't buy ebooks. I buy physical books. So, but I don't want to buy a physical book to put on my shelf. Do you see the conundrum I am in? I am in a hell of my own making. I am just saying that, like, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know if I'm going to continue reading the series. Maybe I will. Who knows? I'm not in the market for reading another erotica book anytime soon, but if I were to read another erotica book or wanted to read another erotica book, I would be more likely to pick up the next book in the series because I followed the author on Instagram and I do like the posts that she publishes and all that stuff. I do find it interesting. I don't know how to justify buying an ebook for myself. You're not even buying a physical product, and Amazon could take that away at any moment. Just take your book away. No, sorry, can't read it anymore. Which, like, physical media does have its merits. I very much believe that, but I don't want the physical media in my home. Anyway, suffice to say, maybe I'll read it. Maybe I'll continue the series. Not anytime soon, though. Next book I read, I actually finished this week, or last week. I finished Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder. Rachel Yoder. So Nightbitch is a story about a woman who is trapped in a domestic cycle of caring for her toddler. Her husband goes away on work trips pretty much all weekdays and comes back on the weekend. So she's pretty much trapped in the house with this toddler. And then throughout this madness, she starts to believe that she's becoming a dog. Weird girl lit fiction. This should be right up my alley. I love weird girl literary fiction. However, this book was such a slog to get through. And I do blame a lot of it on being like, there's no chapter breaks. Well, there are like line breaks. You know, like section breaks, but they're not chapters. It's broken up into, 4 parts? 3 parts, I think? Which is quite big chunks. Like, a chapter is like 10 to 20 pages. 4 chapter breaks in a book that is like 300 pages is a little too long for my liking. And it made it quite difficult for me to physically read the book because it just felt such a slog. Which, like, I understand what's the point of the book. I understand was a stylistic choice. I do. Trust me, I understand that it was not the author's shitty writing in a sense. I do know that it was a stylistic choice. I do know that the author did this on purpose. However, I don't believe that it was a good choice nor a good justification to continue going on in this nonsense. The book was just so boring, which then again, I understand was a stylistic choice by the author because the main character, this woman, is stuck in this domestic prison that she's created for herself. It's the same thing. Like, you walk the kid, you take the kid to the library, you meet up with the other mommies at the library, and then you go home, make dinner, and then go to sleep. And then you're just trapped in a cycle. I understand that domestic duties are oftentimes very mundane, repetitive, and boring. However, I will not forgive this book for boring me to death. There's nothing a book can do to make me feel more vitriolic towards it besides bore me to death. Don't think that justifies it. Yeah, this book was very ambitious. It was trying to do a lot of different things at the same time, which I can appreciate the author's attempt at it, but do I think she succeeded in it? No. It was a great idea. It had these great grand themes that I do acknowledge that they exist in this book, and I think that they can warrant discussion, but the actual execution of it leaves something to be desired, a lot to be desired. Nightbitch was very popular in weird lit girl fiction. A lot of people were recommending it to me. It seemed right up my alley. And I'm very mad that it disappointed me because this seems like it had so much potential. I just think the author was trying to do way too much. Maybe if you like books that bore you to death and you like those like character studies, which I usually love character studies. So this should be right up my alley. I don't understand. I do understand why it's bad, but I don't understand why it became so popular when it is so poorly written. Next book I read was something short and sweet. The Lightning Thief by not by Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief by Riordan. I'm thinking about rereading the series. I don't know if I'll actually finish it. I'm not going to read the Heroes of Olympus series. I refuse. I have Sea of Monsters and what's the third one? Titan's Curse already borrowed on my library account. So I'm sure I'll read those at some point. Will I finish it? I don't know. I'm listening to it. I'm taking it year by year. If you don't know what The Lightning Thief is about, you're a bit strange. And nonetheless, I will summarize it for posterity's sake. Percy Jackson is a half-blood, otherwise that he is the son of a god and a human, a Greek god and a human, and then he goes on an epic adventure to save Zeus's lightning bolt that was stolen. And then his mom also disappears and he has to save her too. So that's the story, that's the plot, that's the plot of the first book pretty much. I did enjoy it. I always have enjoyed Percy Jackson, which is funnily enough because I read my first review of it, which I didn't write anything. I oftentimes don't write notes for my reviews, especially back in the day. But when I first read this, apparently I rated it 3 stars, which I don't understand why I did that. I think it was just a matter of I had to read this for school, so I was a bit bitter. But nonetheless, I still did enjoy the book. I honestly did. I finished the series in like 5 days. But yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it. I do think that the criticism of Rick Riordan as a person are valid, and particularly talking about in the sense of Western culture being seen as the greatest thing in the world, which did rub me the wrong way. Again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't think I am, because art is meant to be criticized, and once you put that out into the public, it's no longer yours to control. You can't control the narrative of how people consume these things, and I don't think that he ever meant. I don't think Rick Riordan is a horrible person. I don't think that he ever meant for it to be heavily implied that the Western culture and civilization is the be-all end-all of human achievement. But at the end of the day, that is what he accomplished. That's what he did. And I do think that I do believe that there's validity in criticizing that part of that comment and almost theme of the book series. However, it's also possible to enjoy the book for what it is. I think that those can be 2 separate things, but they can be combined if that's something that really matters to you, which sometimes matters to me, apparently, but sometimes doesn't, which call me inconsistent, but unfortunately I'm only human. Lightning Thief, enjoyed it, loved it, still always a fun read. This is what I read to get out of my reading slump, because Nightbitch put me in a horrific reading slump. I spent months on this book, and the only reason I managed to finish it because I finished it on audiobook while I was cleaning the house. If you asked me to physically read this book, page by page, I don't think I would have done it. Nonetheless, this is just me hating on Nightbitch again. I read Percy Jackson in the span of a few days. Still really enjoyed it. I like Percy Jackson, which I don't think is that controversial to say. And I do believe the 3rd series of the TV show is coming out this year. So hopefully I'll finish with Titan's Curse to be able to watch that. I did watch half of season 1 of Percy Jackson. Never finished it, actually. Not because of any point, and not that the show did any fault. It was just a matter of I did not have time to justify spending time watching the show. Percy Jackson, would recommend, especially if you have a kid in your life that really wants to read a really fast-paced adventure book. This is a book that I just finished yesterday or 2 days ago. 2 days ago. As of filming this video. It's called Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. It follows a woman who is romantically and sexually attracted to planes. Another weird lit girl fiction, which is right up my alley, and I love this book. 5 out of 5 stars. Genuinely, I love this book. I did not expect there to be such deep and meaningful themes in this book as it did, which was a welcome surprise, frankly. Yeah, I did not expect that. Which, like, I don't know. I was expecting, like, trashy erotica. That's what my girlfriend was telling me it was going to be. And I was like, but it's literary fiction. And I wanted to stay true to my heart, to my soul, to my convictions. But she got in my head. She got in my head. She was convincing me that it was going to be an erotica smut about planes. She was wrong. She was wrong. It was literary fiction all along. It follows Linda, who is attracted to planes. And it follows her journey of constantly trying to be around planes, all while she's trying to maintain a facade of normalcy in her life. Yeah, I don't want to say what theme it is, because I think that you can walk away with this book with many different themes under your belt, and many different themes to consider in this book that I don't think is necessarily valid for me to say that to you. I think that's a bit of a spoiler. I think that is valid to come to your own conclusions about this book. But I really enjoyed it, and the ending was quite sweet. As funny as it is. If any of you guys have read the book, you might think that I'm crazy for liking the ending, but I do think that it felt neatly wrapped up in a bow, which doesn't happen oftentimes in literary fiction. But I think that it was the perfect ending for this book. I don't have much critique on this book, frankly. I love the way that the pacing was like medium pace, like perfectly not slow pace, not fast pace. It was perfect. It was perfectly vanilla. And the characters of this book were amazing. They were flawed. They were funny. It's a very funny book, frankly. It's kind of absurd to listen to a woman who's obsessed with planes. It is absurd. It's funny. The way that she talks about planes is just pure comedy. Like, the book has self-awareness of how ridiculous it is, but at the same time, you walk away with these themes that that makes you think and makes you have a discussion. I feel like how you read this book, you might love it, you might hate it, but nonetheless, you will walk away with opinions of this book. I happen to love it to death. If you like weird girl lit fiction, I would definitely recommend Sky Daddy. It was giving me the vibes of like my year of rest and relaxation. Even unfortunately Nightbitch, which like a lot of people were comparing Nightbitch to Sky Daddy, which like I agree. I believe that they have the same vibe. I just think that Sky Daddy definitely delivered on the execution part. As of right now, I will go through these briefly because I have already been filming for quite some time. But I'll talk about my TBR. I am currently reading Not Sea of Monsters. Is it Sea of Monsters? The second Percy Jackson book. I'll put it here. And I have the third one. It is Sea of Monsters. I already have the Sea of Monsters and the Titan's Curse borrowed in my library because I expect I'm going to run through those quite quickly because they are quite fast-paced and they're audiobooks. So I oftentimes clean while listening to audiobooks. I'm currently reading Piranesi by Susan Clark. I am enjoying it so far. I'm only like 60 pages in, but I am enjoying it. Don't mind this. I covered up the name of my local library. But nonetheless, Susanna Clark by Piranesi. It follows what I thought was a satyr. It's not a satyr. It's actually a reference to art history, which I was convinced that the main character was a satyr despite saying he was human. He's not a satyr. He's a human. But it's a story about him being trapped in a maze, and there's a huge mystery of like how he got there, what's the history, how does he know all these things that he shouldn't if he lived his whole life in a maze, which is what I consider quite interesting. It's the fact that he'll be like, oh, I saw a statue of an angel. And I'm like, how do you know what an angel looks like? How do you know what an angel is? Because you live your whole life in a maze. Like, how do you have knowledge of these conceptions that you shouldn't have if your existence solely existed within a maze that is quite barren and there's no humanity besides one other person there. But yeah, I am quite interested. I need to barrel through this book though because it is due back at the library in like a week, so I have to get this done. Oh, I'm gonna read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher for a book club. From what I know, I have not even received the book in the mail, but what I know is that it's a retelling of the Fall of Usher? The Fall of the House of Usher. That story by Edgar Allan Poe about the incest and all that stuff. That one. I'll put the cover right here. The cover is gorgeous, by the way. But it's a retelling of that. That's all I know. I'm walking into it blind. I think there might be a doctor and a retired soldier, but I don't know if the retired soldier is the doctor and that's another character. I'm going into it very blind. And this was definitely the book cover is beautiful, so I'm going to pick it up type of book. Next book I plan to read, which is more so in the next month, but it is quite a bulky book. Oh my lord, it's 800 pages. It is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, which I have heard devastating things about this book. I have heard that it's trauma porn, which I will be the judge of that. I am going into it cognizant that this book is full of trigger warnings. And I'm someone that's very grateful that oftentimes I don't need to read trigger warnings, at least in books. It doesn't really fuel any deep-seated emotion in me, personally. But I am going to go into it blind. I don't know if that's stupid, but I am going into it blind. The most I know is that it's gay and one character uses a cane. I think it takes place during the AIDS crisis. Cannot tell you. Cannot tell you much more than that. Yeah, I will read this book at some point in this month or in the next month. I think more so in the next month or so, because this is a bulky book. I will get through this. I've had this book on my shelf forever, and I gotta read it at some point. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop with the books that I have planned to read. Thank you so much for listening. I actually will be back with a video next Monday. I'm gonna film it right after this one, or maybe tomorrow. But I will film it, and I will edit it, and for just for you. Just for you. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next week. All my socials are linked below. And yeah, thank you so much.